If you want to become a Python developer as quickly as possible, then you have to skip through the fluff and focus on exactly what matters. Now today, I'm going to give you a proven, detailed blueprint to go from zero experience to a job-ready Python developer faster than you ever thought was possible. Anyways, let's dive into exactly how we do that. First, master the core skills. Second, become efficient with essential tools. 3, specialize and create value in a particular niche. And then 4, find a job or land a job. All right, so let's drill into exactly how you can accomplish each of these steps. So step 1, mastering the core skills. Now, without foundational skills, nothing else matters. So here are the exact skills that you need and how you can approach them. First, core syntax. So you should spend probably about 2 weeks here learning variables, loops, conditionals, data structures like lists, dictionaries, and sets, and functions. You need to write a bunch of Python code, like small scripts that automate small tasks, like maybe renaming files, simple calculations, and basic data manipulation. Now, once you've done that and you're really comfortable writing Python code, you need to move on to object-oriented programming. Now, this means understanding classes, objects, inheritance, and encapsulation deeply. This is because Python is an object-oriented programming language, and to really get good at it, you need to understand these concepts. So you can build small projects like a basic bank account management system or a text-based adventure game to practice these different concepts. Anything that's using object-oriented programming is going to be good practice. Okay, so next I suggest looking at async and concurrency. Now you need to learn how async operations work using the async.io library and practice with basic multi-threading. You also should learn about the global interpreter lock in Python and what that means based on the version of Python that you're using. So you could do something like build a basic web scraper here or a chat application to actually test concurrency in action. Okay, now after that, you want to move on to advanced Python skills. So things like learning decorators, generators, context managers, and comprehensions, so you understand how to write efficient Python code. Now, these features make your code much more professional and are commonly used in Python professional development or professional Python development. Okay, and then next we have modules and packages. So understanding how to organize your projects into reusable modules and Python packages and how to structure your code properly. And then lastly, I suggest looking at some of the built-in Python modules that are used commonly. So modules like OS, JSON, and then even some third-party modules like the request module. Now, the amount of time that this will take you really just depends on how fast you learn and how committed you are. Don't worry too much about the exact timeline, just make sure you understand the concepts before you move on to the next topic. Now, I also do want to say that if you do want to do this quickly, the biggest mistake you can make is relying purely on passive learning. So just watching tutorials or reading blogs or books. Now, studies show that passively learning only helps you retain about 20% of what you consume, but when you actually get your hands dirty, you build, you experiment, you write real code, you can retain as much as 75 to 90%. Now, that's why interactive, project-based learning isn't just optional, it's essential. Now, that's exactly why I've been using and recommending Datacamp and having them sponsor a ton of my videos recently. Datacamp's platform is built around interactive learning where you write real Python code in your browser and get instant feedback and work on real projects that cement your skills. Now, if you're just starting out, I highly recommend the Python Programming Fundamentals track that covers all of the things we just talked about earlier, like variables, data types, functions, and guides you on how to build your own code from day one. And if you want to go further than that, then the Associate Python Developer track dives into more advanced topics like object-oriented programming, debugging, and even real-world projects to help you build a job-ready portfolio, which we'll talk about later in the video. Now, what I love most about this is how it's structured and the practical learning path that you're following. You're not just memorizing concepts, you're applying them every step of the way, and that's really the best way to learn. Now, Datacamp is currently offering 25% off with the link in the description, so if you're serious about accelerating your Python journey, now is the perfect time to get started by pressing that link. Anyways, let's move on to the next topic here. Once you've mastered the core Python syntax and the language, you need to start getting efficient with the tools that you're going to use as a developer. So your tools determine your productivity and your effectiveness. These tools are not negotiable, and you need to learn the following. So first, Git. Now, you need to spend time mastering Git commands like commit, branching, merges, rebases, and reverting. And you need to create and collaborate on GitHub repositories and be comfortable working with other people in a codebase. Next is command line interface or CLI. So I highly suggest that you understand the core commands like cd, ls, pwd, and just be comfortable working in a commands line and navigating the file system without a graphical user interface. This is just common as a programmer, and it's something especially as a Python developer you're going to do a lot because it relies heavily on scripting. Next, I have basic networking. So I highly suggest understanding HTTP protocols, REST APIs, and simple networking tasks like handling requests and parsing responses using libraries like the request module in Python. Then virtual environments. As a Python developer, you need to understand these, so I recommend mastering virtual environment tools such as VNV, UV, or Anaconda to keep your projects isolated and to manage dependencies. Now, this is just best practice. This is done in pretty much all Python projects, so you need to understand this. Next, we get into debugging and testing. So you need to gain proficiency with debugging tools like the built-in Python debugger and testing frameworks like PyTest. So you need to understand how to write unit tests and how to avoid writing buggy code. And if you do write buggy code, understanding how to debug that. Now, this shouldn't take you as long as the first section, but it's absolutely essential that you know these core tools and kind of topics that I mentioned, because as a developer, you're going to be using them every single day. Okay. Once we've gone through that, we've learned the core Python language and syntax, we've picked up the core tools, now it's time to actually get to the point where you would be able to land a job. Now, Python is used for a ton of different stuff, so at this stage, you need to pick a niche so that you can actually land a job and be valuable from day one. So I'm going to go through a few different things that Python is good at and niches that you could get into where you'd be likely to land a job. Okay, so number one, and probably the easiest way to dive in here, is with web development. So this is using things like Django, Flask, or Fast API to build web applications. So you could build maybe an e-commerce site, you can build backend APIs, you could build a blog application, doesn't matter, but a lot of developers are hired as web developers with Python. So you need to know those core frameworks and technologies. Okay, the next niche you could get into is something like AI and machine learning. So you could use TensorFlow, PyTorch, scikit-learn, Pandas, NumPy, all of the data science related libraries, and then you'd ideally start working with core machine learning algorithms. I have many tutorials on this channel, get into things like neural networks or convolutional neural networks, computer vision, and then maybe eventually LLMs. Okay, now the next topic I have here is data science. Now there is a lot of overlap between data science and AI and ML, but this is a more particular kind of specific role where you're expected to know a little bit more mathematics, things like probability and statistics, and then a different set of Python libraries. So similar to before, we have Pandas, NumPy, Matplotlib, and then more importantly, just understanding how to clean data, how to analyze data, and how to visualize it. Again, this is a very common role for a Python developer, is doing data science related work. Okay, and then we have scripting and DevOps. So if you were to get into this niche, then you would be learning automation tools like Docker, Kubernetes, CI and CD pipelines, and then scripting for platforms like AWS or Azure or Google Cloud. Now your role here would be to build deployment automations or infrastructure as code projects. Okay, so this is the area where it's going to be wildly different for all of you. You need to pick one of those areas. Of course, there's a few other ones as well. They're just not as popular, and then you'll actually be ready to land a job. Now, assuming that you've picked one of these niches here and you've gone deep into those technologies so that you actually have the skills employers are looking for, now it's about actually landing a job. Now, of course, in order to do that is a lot easier said than done, and this video is not going to cover everything, but I will give you a high-level overview of a few things that you'll need to do. And yes, I know that they sound obvious, but I can promise you I work with a lot of developers and most people just don't do this. Okay, so this is how you can approach getting a job. First, if you don't have any experience, you need to build a strong portfolio that showcases your skills in that particular niche. Next, you need to optimize your LinkedIn profile and your resume where you highlight Python-specific skills, tools, and projects, where you're not just a generic developer, you are a Python developer. Then you need to actively apply for jobs and internships, even if you feel slightly underqualified. Yes, you may be underqualified for a lot of jobs, you might not tick every single requirement, but you still need to apply, and you need to do this thoughtfully. Then you need to network heavily through platforms like LinkedIn, tech meetups, or developer forums. Look, we all know that most jobs come from a network, so this really isn't a step that you can skip, especially if you want to land a job quickly. Then, assuming you're getting some kind of interviews or traction, maybe even if not, you can still prepare for technical interviews by practicing platforms like LeetCode, HackerRank, etc., and more importantly, just actually being good at writing Python code. Now, all of the stuff that's in here is a whole video on its own, which I do plan to make in the future, but this is also something that I specifically focus on in my Dev Launch program. If you're interested in that, you can click the link in the description and apply and see if you would be a good fit. Okay. So that's it. That's what you need to do in order to become a Python developer as fast as possible. Quick recap here. You need to learn and master the critical skills quickly. You need to use the essential tools effectively. You need to specialize and deliver immediate value. And then you need to aggressively pursue job opportunities by doing all of the things that I mentioned. Companies are always hiring for proven value, that you've demonstrated that you actually know what you're doing, not just potential, right? So you need to prove to them why you should get hired. Now, if you followed what I laid out in this video, obviously with a bit more detail and some nuance, then I do think you have a chance to land a job as a Python developer. I'm not going to say this is easy, but this is definitely something that you can do. I've helped many people that watch this channel do that, and I've done it myself. Anyways, guys, that's going to wrap up the video. If you found this helpful, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next one.